The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/247 and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Must be 21 plus and present in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, permitted parishes only, Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, or Wyoming. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, or call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York, or visit oasas.ny.gov/gambling. Standard text messaging rates apply. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Utah, and other states where prohibited.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, GoPowercat.com's Kansas State Athletics Show. Now, here's your host, GoPowercat publisher, Tim Fitzgerald.
Hi everyone, it is Tim Fitzgerald at GoPowercat.com with another edition of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Robbins Motor Company. Kansas State 2-0, Missouri 2-0. The two former rivals will renew this rivalry in Columbia on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Of course, they hadn't played in about 10 years, heading into last year's contest in Manhattan, which was a blowout victory for the Wildcats. It took place in a driving rain that really seemed to help K-State's cause as the game went on. Will this game be different or another K-State blowout? We've got a lot to discuss on today's edition of the Pregame Podcast. And, of course, we will have our normal cast of characters. The former K-State offensive lineman Brien Hanley will come in with his thoughts on this rivalry and the X's and O's. We'll dive deeper into Missouri with our own Ryan Wallace, who's been doing the scout on the Tigers. And then we'll wrap it all up with Ryan Gilbert from our staff to talk about some of the betting lines, some of the good odds out there. Should you take the over, the under, the spread? Gilbert will have all of his thoughts on that. Once again, it is an 11 a.m. game in Columbia. It is on the SEC network. And if you don't have the SEC network, you need to find a way to watch it. This game isn't on any other ESPN platform, including ESPN Plus. It is exclusively on the SEC network. So make sure you pre-check your cable or streaming options to make sure you have access to it. But it's going to be a fun day in Columbia with a sellout crowd. Some people think it'll be a lot of K-Staters, like half, and I think that's a little bit over optimistic, but I know that thousands upon thousands of Purple people will be in Columbia for a game that honestly a lot of us miss from the old Big 8 and Big 12 days. Once again, before we get going, we're sponsored by Robbins Motor Company. K-State fans, visit the Robbins Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat location on Anderson Avenue in Manhattan for an exciting test drive. Robbins Motor Company, title sponsor of the Powercat Pregame Podcast. And let's stop messing around and let's bring in Brien Hanley. And there he is, Mr. Brien Hanley, the former Kansas State offensive lineman and my advisor on podcast equipment. Brien, I have a new Shure microphone because I had Shure Envy.
Yeah, those are nice, man. They're nice. I like it.
I know. I used it on our regular podcast yesterday, and I'm like, I can actually tell a difference because every little noise I make, this damn mic picks up.
Yes.
So it's incredible. Let's get on to a very, very important football game for two football programs. A non-conference game, sadly, because it is Missouri and Kansas State, two teams that should be in the same conference, but aren't because those are the times in which we live. Let's start with the bigger picture. Missouri makes more money in the SEC. They play a kind of a fun schedule. I mean, I had a Missouri fan tell me that, they're not going to Waco and Lubbock. They're, going to Knoxville and places like that. And I'm like, well, that's valid. And Missouri is connected to the rest of the SEC. But overall, has this been a good move for Missouri football and Missouri athletics?
I don't know. I mean, look, the first 2 years, and that's what Missouri fans point to, they had a lot of success. But if you actually just take a little bit of a dive into that, Florida was down. Right. Tennessee was down. Georgia was, all these schools were down. And Missouri was good. I mean, you got to give them credit. But then since that time period, I mean, people have passed. Tennessee has passed them. Kentucky has passed them. Florida, I don't know if Florida's passed them. Florida's kind of regressed. But Georgia clearly has passed them. So just in that division, I don't know if it's a great move for them or not. I know a lot of Missouri fans will say it's SEC and they pound their chest about it. And I'm like, but if you're Arkansas, do you pound your chest about the SEC when you never, ever win? I mean, what difference does it make? And I'm not one of those guys that says, oh, I love our conference. I love the conference. Yay, yay. I'm like, how does that help me? We didn't win it. So if we're not winning it, what difference does it make? So the money wise, yes, it's good for Missouri. As far as on the playing surfaces, I don't think so.
Well, I would point out that those first two seasons, they still had their feet in Texas recruiting.
Yes.
They've kind of uprooted from what they had been able to do in the Big 12 with building rosters and moved away from it. And look, I'm all in on the SEC if you're competitive. I'm all in on the Big 10 if you're competitive. Well, I mean, you and I could put together a team right now and be competitive outside of the top few teams in that conference. But I get it. The money's great, but I don't think it's been good. And they have lost some traditional rivalries. And this is why I love having this game. Yeah. This game means something on the non-conference schedule at a level that, a Washington State or a Rutgers, the two future opponents, or even, looking back at some of the ones they've had recently, this absolutely means something to the fan bases. It's sold out. It's the first non-conference game, apparently, in 10 seasons that's been sold out by Missouri. It's the first sellout in about 5 years, I think. This game has importance to these fan bases, and you were part of it back in the Big 12 in 97 and 98. Give me your overall thoughts on the importance of this rivalry to these schools.
I think it's big, not just for recruiting purposes, because, Kansas City is fertile recruiting grounds. I'm not saying it's Florida or Texas or anything like that, but Kansas City puts out good football players. And Kansas State used to dive in there. And before, we used to get whoever we wanted. out of Kansas City and St. Louis. The tides have changed, and Missouri has kind of taken that over. I think it's coming back. I think K-State is battling, which is good. So in that aspect, this game is huge. As far as the rivalry itself, I think they got to keep it going. Now, obviously, conference games, all that stuff gets scheduled out 100 years in advance. So I understand all that. But I think it would be great if they kept playing each other. It's fierce rivalry. Neither one thinks that the other is better, which that's the whole thing that makes a rivalry. I know Missouri fans think that they are a better program than K-State. I know that for an absolute fact. I got too many Missouri friends that's all they point to. But what they usually point to is stuff that happened before any of us were born.
Right.
Then that's what they point to. So, but I just think it's great. I think it's great. I mean, that Kansas City, if they played in Kansas City, I think it would be awesome. If they somehow could get a neutral game in Kansas City, I think it would be incredible.
Yeah, I think that I love having this series back. I wish they would extend it. I know Kansas State has some fresh openings now in its non-conference, but I doubt Missouri does. Let's dig into the Tigers a little bit and start with quarterback Brady Cook. There's a general displeasure that I sense from Missouri fans about their quarterback play, and I've seen it, and I kind of get it. But now I'm looking at his stats. Okay, he's completed 77.5% of his passes this season. He has 3 TDs and no interceptions. His quarterback rating is 181. He's, thrown for, I don't know, 180 yards a game or something. It's 85. Look, his stats don't point to a bad quarterback.
Right.
And yet there's something lacking about him that I can't quite grasp. He had one of the 3 interceptions last year in Manhattan in miserable conditions. I kind of discount all those interceptions because of the conditions, but he just doesn't quite have that thing that great quarterbacks have. And I don't want to put it all on him, but he seems to be part of the problem with Missouri's offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's just what you said. The stats don't point to him being bad. Now, some of that early in the season is inferior competition that has helped out with that. But I don't know. I just, when you look at him and you go out and you see it, it doesn't scream to you great quarterback play or even really good quarterback play. It just doesn't stand out like that. But we'll see. I mean, a lot of things could change in a year. Maybe the guy got a lot better. I know that he was hurt a lot last year. But we'll see what happens. I just, the quarterback, it's just what you said. I'm just not sure how good he is based on the competition that they played. I saw last year and it wasn't good. And I think that's what Missouri fans are saying is like, look, we played against some 2 teams that we should have beat 100-0. And then once we find out and we play somebody that's good, then we're going to revert back to last year. For K-State fans, hopefully that's the case. But we'll see. We'll see. I think they were holding back a lot in those first 2 games, a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think they got a little too conservative maybe against their last opponent.
Yes.
And it almost caught up to them. But Luther Burden is very aptly named. He is a burden for all who try to defend him. Great speed, strength. Didn't do much in last year's game with K-State. And now all of a sudden is their leading receiver going over 100 a game. Luther Burden, man, they got to keep track of him or he is a dude that can blow this game wide open for Missouri.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year, it took him a minute to get acclimated to college football. Sometimes it just happens. It doesn't matter if you're a 5-star, 2-star, whatever. Sometimes it just takes kids a second to get acclimated to college football, being away from home for the first time, all that kind of stuff. It can take a minute to get used to that. Well, it seems like he's figured it out. And I'm just telling K-State fans right now, if we don't have a handle on him, he's going to hurt us bad. He is that type of football player. Explosive, fast. He's got good hands. I mean, he's going to be a handful. Even if we have him under control, he's going to be a handful.
Yeah. And and as many problems as the Missouri offense has had. And Brien, I look at their stats and I'm like, why are you only averaging 29 points a game against this competition? Because the stats seem to point to a more effective offense than it is in reality. But this team's about defense. This team plays great defense. One thing we know about Missouri under Coach Drinkwitz is they've recruited exceptionally well. They brought in some dudes, and they're fast and physical on defense. They're going to give K-State problems. And Brien, you're a former offensive lineman. If this line doesn't snap to it and play up to the levels at which we expect from them, this is going to be a problem. I know they're shuffled. I don't expect Christian Duffy to play. Maybe he will. So they'll still have BB out there on the right tackle spot. They'll have some guys out of normal position. But, brother, they got to be better.
Yeah, they absolutely have to be better. Just what we talked about previously, at some point, we got to say, you know what, this is where we're going. This is how we're going to move forward. You can't keep shuffling guys around and build a cohesive unit. It just does not work that way. Not on the offensive line. At some point, okay, guys, this is how we're moving forward with the team. This is how the line is moving forward. And to keep because they're struggling. Let's just call it and say what it is. They're not playing up to their capabilities. And they got to be able to run the football when they want to run the football. That's the key to a lot of stuff. Run it when you want to run the football or when you need to run it. And, you know, the first two games, okay, maybe a little bit, but not so much. We'll see. But against Missouri, you're going to have to be able to do that because Missouri's got some big athletic guys that they're not going to let you just push them around. They're not going to do that. You're going to have to physically overpower them to get the ball where you're trying to do in the pass game or in the run game as well. So we'll see what happens, but the line's got to get it together. They got to get going.
Absolutely. Did Troy put things on video for others to kind of follow on how they did accomplish making K-State mostly one-dimensional? They bottled up the run game to a degree. It wasn't smothered. They still ran the ball for, a decent amount of yardage, but they didn't really have a lot of, key running plays in the game. It was done through the air. Did Troy put a blueprint out there for Missouri and others to follow?
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily the blueprint, but I know it was a good plan because the first 10 snaps of the game, they blitzed. They put a bunch of guys at the line in the box and they blitzed, whether it was a passing down or not, they were coming. And, if that's going to be the case, and they're basically saying, we're going to make you beat us through the air. Well, K-State did that.
Yep.
So, but that doesn't matter. You still have to be able to run the football. You got to be able to run it. Even if somebody's trying to make you one-dimensional, you got to find a way. I'm not saying you have to run the ball for 10, 12 yards a carry, but you got to be able to crank out 3 or 4 yards. So if that's going to be the blueprint, hey, maybe you just say, you know what? If you're going to put that many people up there, we're going to throw the football and back you up. And if they don't back up, just keep throwing it. I go, but sooner or later they'll back up because chunk plays will start to happen and teams can't recover from that. If you constantly have chunk plays, they can't recover from that. So they'll back up a little bit. Then you can run the football. And it might be, a lot of people, hey, you run the ball to throw it. Sometimes you got to throw it to run it. And that might be what K-State needs to do.
We discussed this on the Insiders on Monday. They brought Keegan Johnson in for his first snaps in the second half of that game. I think they're kind of nursing along a hamstring issue that he brought with him from Iowa that was re-aggravated late in fall camp, right before that. I think it was game prep for SEMO. They're being very careful with it. They don't want it to be an ongoing issue all season long, but he's got to play. I mean, we saw it against Troy. Once they put him on the field, he kind of changes the mathematics of what Troy could do because he's so elusive and with good hands. He's a difference maker. Does it work to their advantage if he can stay healthy? That there's not much on film about how K-State wants to use Keegan Johnson in the passing game.
I mean, first off, you're 100% right. He's got to play. And it changes, to me, everything. Just having a dynamic weapon out there that you can get the ball to that can beat one-on-one press coverage, whatever kind of coverage out there. He's just got to be out there. Now, that's not saying that everybody else is chopped liver. I'm just saying you got to have – look, this is going to be a good football game. Missouri, I think, is better than what a lot of people think that they are based on last year. I know their coaching is bad. Let's just call it what it is. Their coaching is bad. But the players are still the players. Right. They have pride. They understand what happened last year. They put everything into this football game. So to have one of your key weapons out there, even if it's 80, 85%, he's got to be out there. He's got to be out there.
Yep. And going back and tying those two topics together, another thing Troy's defense put on film for everyone was Ben Sinnott was the featured player of their scout. Yeah. They did not want Ben Sinnott getting free downfield. They bracketed him. He had, only a couple targets on the day. It was effective. We asked him about it on Tuesday, and he said, look, if they want to commit those kind of resources to stopping me, that'll only help other guys. I'm fine with it. But you kind of could tell Will Howard, without Ben Sinnott being available, made him a little uncomfortable. And I think a lot of teams are going to try to do the same.
Yeah, and that's the maturation process for Will, is to understand what's going on. And there was a couple of forced throws. Look, if the guy's not open, he's just not open. Right. If they're taking him away, then the other guy's got to be free. And they were. So you just got to throw them the football. If I was a defense, that's what I would do. I would absolutely take him away and make him go somewhere else and prove that those other guys can beat us. I would take him away. And Troy did that. Other teams, I believe, are going to do the same thing. But it's also on Colin Klein to devise ways to get him open regardless of what defense that they're doing, because that's what good offensive coordinators do. You got to you telling me people don't bracket and double team Travis Kelce? Absolutely. But somehow he still gets wide open, not just open, wide open. So there's ways that they can devise plays for him to get open. So, and again, second game of the year, not wanting to show too much. I got to believe that those things are out there, and this game will be a game that we throw it out.
One more topic before I let you go. Return game hasn't done much so far this season against two opponents where you typically would think maybe they would have some success because of, the overall depth of rosters. Are you concerned at all about special teams at this point?
I don't know that I'm concerned, but I think it's a point to where we've got to say, I think we can be better. Right. I think K-State can be better. Look, I mean, for 30 years, we've been known as special teams U. I don't care what anybody else says anywhere else. Kansas State has owned special teams for the last 30 years. But we haven't done it here lately. A block punt, a return. And I'm not so much into you have to return it for a touchdown or anything like that. I'm just saying, hey, we get a kick return. Let's own the field position battle. Let's return a kick 30 yards, a punt 30 yards, something like that. We haven't done anything like that yet, not to significance. So, yes, it can help, but I think K-State's just got to be better at it.
I would agree. I think they'll pull it together, but it's been a little – uncharacteristic to watch K-State not make plays in special teams. We have seen a field goal. We've seen some pretty decent kickoff coverage, and also the punting has been pretty good. But, K-State, that return game has always been the X factor going way back. Brien Hanley, thank you so much. We will reconvene on Monday with the rest of the Insiders cast to talk about this game and everything else that happened in Big 12 and college football on Monday afternoon.
All right. I appreciate it.
That's it for this first segment of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Robbins Motor Company. On the other side, Ryan Wallace awaits for even more breakdown of the Missouri Tigers on the Powercat Pregame Podcast.
GoPowercat.com's Powercat Podcast continues after this short break.
Diets and workouts, you've done the work, so why can't you get to your goal weight? That's because up to 70% of your weight is predetermined by your genetics. So while you've been told that it's all about your willpower, you're actually fighting your biology. Don't do it alone. Found's doctor-designed program uses medication as part of a treatment plan that targets your body's unique biological needs, so that your body works with you and not against you. Take the quiz at joinfound.com to see if Found's weight loss program is right for you.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast.
Welcome back to the Powercat Pregame Podcast. We thank Brien Hanley for his weekly indulgence here with us as he breaks down a few of the things about Missouri that jump out and also his memories of playing Missouri. And now we have Mr. Ryan Wallace. You can see him on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. We're sponsored by Robbins Motor Company. The dedicated team of automotive professionals at Robbins, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat will match you with a vehicle that suits your lifestyle and budget. Robbins Motor Company, title sponsor of the Powercat Pregame Podcast. If they add one more line of cars, I'm not getting through that read. Wally, I'm intrigued by this game. Last year was an easy win for K-State. The Wildcats got up. The weather turned south. But it sounds like in your research, it might not have just been weather related. This Missouri team, if you get them down, they're down.
It's really interesting. I went back. I was present at that game. Me and my wife decided to go up for that one. And I didn't remember much of it. And that had nothing to do with me being a fan and taking in the festivities beforehand. That was the delay and we left, the game was kind of got out of hand. We were tired of getting wet. We went in and left early for the game to Aggieville. So I remember Kansas State playing well, but I really wanted to go back and watch the game. And so I went back and I rewatched and I went back and I re-listened to this show heading into the Missouri game. And by golly, Fitz, you could have just clipped that show and put it for today, because we were saying the same things that I feel like we're going to say today, which was an offensive line that's a little shaky, a quarterback and Brady Cook that doesn't really look like he's going to beat you. If that sounds like last week, it's because it does. Gunnar Watson, Brady Cook. I mean, they're guys that you feel like would probably lose you games before they can win you games. And it's, again, a lot of skill position players that look good on paper, but have just never seemed to materialize in Columbia under Eli Drinkwitz. So, again, going back and watching that game, Kansas State looked like the more complete team. They look like the more motivated and fundamentally sound team. And as we head into this Saturday morning, I don't see any real reason to think that will change.
Yeah, I don't even know that the game being in Columbia is going to make a difference, because I think there's going to be enough K-Staters there that it won't entirely sound like a home game. But I also think that either this game's competitive at halftime and it'll go down to the wire, or K-State will get up 2-3 scores and Missouri will just say, okay, we're going to lose again.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the stats that you were alluding to earlier, this is a team that isn't really built. When I say a team, I mean referencing Missouri, that's not really built for a comeback because they just don't do it. I wrote on GoPowercat earlier this week that playing from behind isn't something that they do well because they just don't ever seem to come back. Last season, the Tigers were outscored in the fourth quarter 104-60. And over the past 2 years, Missouri is 1-9 in games that they trailed at the half, and they are 1-12 in games that they trailed when entering the fourth quarter. And the lone win required overtime, and the lone win did not have Brady Cook at quarterback. So again, this is a team that is just not structured that way. And Fitz, and I know you agree with me on this, this is a trickle-down thing. That starts at the top. It's a cultural thing. It's a foundational thing. It's the way that they recruit, and then the way that they aren't developing guys, and again, motivating guys to overcome adversity. And you definitely see the differences between a Chris Kleiman-led team and what K-State has done under him, and Eli Drinkwitz and what the Missouri Tigers have not done under him.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. The struggles they have, and it does come from the top. It absolutely does. I'm a big believer, if you coach on emotion, that's what you get from your players. You get these ups and downs. So you get these swings in performance when you hit the right notes emotionally, or, they're just down for that game. But if you prepare on, fundamentals and those type of things, you're going to be in pretty good shape for the most part. What's up with Cook? You look at his stats, They're good. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with his stats, particularly through these first two games. But it's not there. I just don't see him performing at very high levels.
He is what he is. I mean, that's the best way that I can describe it. Because again, when I went back and watched the tape of last year, and even the games this year, when you watch against South Dakota and Middle Tennessee, he can move the ball with his feet. And he's definitely a quarterback that can keep you honest. He did it to K-State at times last year in the rain. But when you talk about him as a passer, he is what he is. He's doesn't have a strong arm, and you'll hear Missouri fans talk on and on about it, and they're right, because he underthrows. He has the skill guys. Luther Burden, especially the former 5-star, Theo Weiss now from Oklahoma, another former 5-star, that he's underthrown numerous times already this season. He doesn't have the arm strength. Even in the intermediate routes, he's overthrowing guys. The accuracy just isn't there. And for me, Fitz, it's kind of what K-State saw with Adrian Martinez last year. He is what he is. And I think, again, when you look top down, I'm not sure that Eli Drinkwitz is doing him any favors, because he's still trying to put, what is it, a square peg into a circle hole. I mean, it isn't working. And Eli Drinkwitz, the personality and the attitude and the mentality he has isn't one to change. He's kind of stuck in his ways. And again, I think Kansas State fans know that all too well. We saw that for a handful of years here in the mid 2000s.
Yeah. It's not because my plan didn't work. My plan's great. That was a mentality that was pretty prevalent around here.
Fitz, they're calling him a lot of resources with Missouri, and that's what's great going into this game is there's all sorts of podcasts and blogs that I was able to tap into. I laughed out loud at this one. There's a faction of fans anyway, starting to call him Konzowitz, which is referencing Quanzo Martin and the ineptitude that Missouri basketball had. That is what K-State is walking into. That is what Missouri has themselves kind of back against the wall. We're going to figure out a lot about this Tiger team because, again, the Boo Birds are out heavy for Eli Drinkwitz right now.
Yeah, and losing to K-State at home won't help. Losing big to K-State at home may not be something short of having a huge season in the SEC that he can get out of. I just feel like this is a huge game for him and his program. And Wally, I don't think he fully realizes it. I just think he's so aloof about everything that he doesn't get it. But you mentioned the receivers. They've got talent. They should be better than they are. And that's the thing is if those guys get going and somehow Cook gets comfortable, it's a big threat. There's no doubt that they have the horses that can outrun K-State. I truly believe that. Yeah,
and I mean, Luther Burden is obviously the most dangerous man that K-State will want to mark. But again, I get the feeling that Chris Kleiman and Joe Klanderman they're not going to overemphasize Luther Burden. They might put some help over the top on just him, but at the same time, I think that's because they don't fear Brady Cook doing anything to anyone else. Right now, Luther Burden has been the bright spot, I think, for this offense when they can get him the ball. 8.4 yards after catch per reception. So, he's only like 5'11", but just incredibly fast and very sturdy for his frame where he's able to break tackles. Again, the biggest problem goes back on offense to, I think, Eli Drinkwitz. We'll start with receivers besides Burden, leaning, I think, on guys that look good on paper, but just haven't really proven themselves. He hasn't dipped in. Josh Manning is a kid that I think right now would be seeing the field had he chosen Kansas State last summer. Instead, he goes to Missouri for a litany of reasons. And he seems like a guy that should be getting more time on the field, and he isn't. And instead, they're turning to a Theo Weiss that's a former 5-star that probably should be doing more, but isn't. Mookie Cooper, an Ohio State transfer that was a heralded recruit that has now been at Missouri for 2 to 3 years and has, again, just hasn't developed. Nothing's there. And then the bigger problem, though, besides Brady Cook, is this offensive line. And Eli Drinkwitz touched on it in his press conference this week that there probably is going to be a shakeup for the offensive line heading into Kansas State. The right guard position was one that he specifically called out as having issues that need to be addressed. It sounds like Marcellus Johnson, who's an Eastern Michigan transfer that has been a backup. They've been starting Cameron Johnson, who is a Houston transfer there, but he is penalty prone beyond belief. And so it sounds like they might go a different direction there. Armand Mimbo is a kid out of Lee Summit North at K-State, recruited heavy. He ends up picking Missouri, and Fitz, he's a natural guard. I mean, that's what he does best. And of course, Missouri's playing him at right tackle this year. And that's because, I think they're doing a poor job of developing, not recruiting that position well. And they're like, well, Armand's the best guy we got. Let's throw him over there. And it's been kind of up and down for Armand this year. So again, I think that's an area that even without Felix Anudike Uzama, that's an area that I think we'll see Khalid Duke, Nate Matlack, Brendan Mott, that all those guys, Uso should thrive in this game against just an offensive line that's not playing with a lot of confidence. And, again, that kind of trickles back to the quarterback and the receivers and everything else. The offense for Missouri has really been, I think, the problem to this point, which again is funny because that was supposed to be Eli Drinkowitz's strong suit.
Yes, indeed. Let's flip it over now and look at that defense for Missouri, which has been good. The offense for K-State struggled at times against Troy. Troy had a great game plan. I'm not sure Missouri will try to duplicate that game plan because that doesn't seem like their style. To look at something that works and things that someone thought of something else. But this defense can give K-State trouble, can't it?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And they bring back virtually everybody. Defensive end, kind of like K-State, one of their best pass rushers is gone, and they've had to replace him. And they've tried to slide out a defensive tackle out to that end, Robinson, which it sounds like fans, again, are kind of hollering for them to move him back inside because he's strong against the run, but obviously at his size, he's a natural defensive tackle, isn't getting near the pass rush that they saw him get from the interior last year. So nevertheless, still a very strong, I think, front seven. Tyron Hopper is a guy that played pretty good in that rain-soaked game last year, and I think in better conditions and a year more seasoned, and especially a year more into the defensive philosophy, having transferred from Florida, I think you'll see him thrive. And the secondary is very good. Not quite as active, I think, or as ball hungry as you saw from Troy a week ago, but probably better and stickier in coverage. So this will be I will go out on a limb and say this will be the best test that the K-State offense has seen to this point. And again, Fitz, we've talked about it off air leading up to this game, but it's very, very interesting what Kansas State will decide to do, not only at the start, but as the game progresses at right tackle. Will we continue to see Carver Willis? Will we see Cooper Beebe start there right off the bat? And then how does whatever choice and whatever direction they go at right tackle affect the rest of the line? The line's been good for the most part, the starters anyway. Have held their own for the most part outside of Willis, but this will no doubt be their strongest test. They'll have to have great communication. And I will also say this, Fitz, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes if you're about to lead into anything along these lines from an offensive scheme standpoint or strategy standpoint. Watching what Adrian Martinez was able to do in the game last year, this certainly feels like a great opportunity for Kansas State to give Avery Johnson some run in certain scenarios. And I literally mean run. Maybe you use him to catch the defense off guard here and there with his arm, but seeing what Missouri was able to generate along the defensive line last year, Will Howard's good. He's gotten a lot better at feeling the pocket out, but he's not nearly as dynamic as Adrian Martinez was or as Avery Johnson is. This would be a great opportunity to really get Avery in there, shake up the defense, keep them honest, and again, just throw a wrinkle into what Missouri has to prepare for.
That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about it. This is a game that Avery could make a difference with. He's a great athlete. You want your best athletes on the field? Well, you got to find a way to get him out there.
Right.
If they're not going to redshirt him, I think we'll get an indication of it in this game because I do think they'll find a role for him in it. How does this game play out? How do you think this game displays itself over the 4 quarters?
I think that it will be competitive off the bat just because, again, you're facing a Missouri team, whether it be from the coaching staff or the locker room, everything about this program feels like it's got its back against the wall. I think that they will have some added juice to knowing what happened in the game in Manhattan last year. So I don't see them coming out and laying flat. I feel like it will be similar to what we saw last week against Troy. I don't know if you're going to see, as we saw with Troy, Missouri generate a ton of offense. They might catch K-State off guard early. They had a pretty good opening drive, if I remember, last year that ended with a field goal. Maybe they take the ball all the way down and score early, and they're amped and the crowd's into it. But overall, I feel like it will be similar to last week. I go back and forth, Fitz, on whether this is going to be like some 20-plus point win or like a 7-point win. But either way, I still feel strongly that K-State is just mentally more prepared for whatever is going to be thrown at them. And they're just the more complete team. And I think you look at the points for, the points against, the margin that K-State has right now is they're plus 74 on the season. Missouri is plus 29. And that's the only teams lower right now in the SEC are South Carolina and Texas A&M. So again, it tells me that I can't put a lot of confidence in a team right now in Missouri that is built, on possibilities and potential. I'm going to go with the thing that's more proven, right, and that's K-State. That's where I have them right now. So like last year, I feel like it will be competitive probably early on. K-State will probably pull away either right before the half or right after half, and you're going to see Missouri do what they tend to always do, which is kind of throw the towel in, so to speak.
Yep. Turnovers, penalties, bad special teams, those things. If K-State does any of that, they're going to make this game much more competitive. If K-State handles those areas, Wally, I think this could turn into a blowout. Early third quarter, just K-State running away with this thing. But I at the end of the day, I expect this to be a one-score outcome. I expect it to be a great college football game. But I agree with you. I think K-State is the better team and will prevail.
Yeah, and the last point for me, and I think your old friend, our old colleague at Rivals, Gabe DeArmond, I was listening to his show, and he brought up a great point, which was, Missouri has to play at least a B-plus game.
Right.
And then depending on that also would require, K-State to play down. And on top of that, he even mentioned, too, that, if you're going to play a B-plus game and not an A game, you're probably going to have to get a defensive score, some kind of turnover, a special team score. Again, Fitz, just not things that the history books and the resume and the blueprint have shown that Missouri has been able to do, whereas K-State often does that, whether it be at home or on the road. So again, I'm with you, Fitz. I like K-State in this one yet again.
And that's why we have Ryan Wallace on the show. He does what I never did in college. That's homework. And
You're giving me too much there.
Delivers the goods. Wally, appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Fitz.
That's it for this segment of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Robbins Motor Company. Ryan Gilbert is in the wings, waiting to come in and talk about your betting lines for the weekend. Not a great slate of games around the Big 12, but there is a backyard brawl that caught my interest. We'll be right back.
GoPowercat.com's Powercat Podcast continues after this short break.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast.
Welcome back to the Powercat Pregame Podcast. 2 sections of this wonderful showdown. One more to go, and we're going to talk betting lines, odds, all the good stuff for all those fellow deviants out there. You degenerates are my kind of people. Also, my kind of people are the folks at Robbins Motor Company, where they strive to earn lifetime business and build relationships selling quality cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, and offering top-notch parts and service. Robbins Motor Company, title sponsor of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, and I can vouch for top-notch service as the Durango just was in the shop and out of the shop. And speaking of a guy that needs to go into the shop, Ryan Gilbert joins us. How'd you like that intro, Gills?
Good. It was great. Okay. I'll be in the shop if you need me.
Yeah, okay. Not a great slate of games this week around the Big 12, but I did my best in picking the games that mean the most to me. I mean, it's about me. I get emotional talking about this, but I'm a great gambler. That's a lie. Let's get started. I don't know why I'm intrigued with this game. Maybe because Michael Smith, former Kansas State coach and receiver, is at South Alabama. They are only a touchdown underdog at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is bad. I think South Alabama might give them a scare here.
Agreed. I agree with you, Fitz. And I think this line really is reflective of where this Oklahoma State program is at right now. I think you touched on that on the Questions podcast yesterday. Only a touchdown against South Alabama. You would think that that's crazy, but with Oklahoma State's quarterback situation, all the uncertainty there, South Alabama's a respective program, won 10 games last year, obviously suffered a loss in the bowl game, but I think really this speaks to where Oklahoma State might be at right now. This isn't the same Mike Gundy that we've seen in years past, but I would lean, South Alabama, but at the same time, 7 points is really small. So I like South Alabama just because of the issues Oklahoma State is having right now. But I mean, is it too good to be true? It was always the question that you got to ask yourself, right? With Oklahoma State.
I agree. Here's another, I think, an odd line. BYU's only an 8-point underdog at Arkansas, and I don't think BYU's looked that good this year.
I think BYU's looked fine. The defense has looked great. The offense has not looked good for BYU. And so when you've only given up 16 points on the entire season, you're going to get some respect from Vegas. And that's why I do lean BYU here. This is an underrated game. I like those graphics you have up there, Fitz. Those are fancy. Nice. That's a really nice touch on this. But coming off of, a couple of good defensive games, I like BYU to keep this game close. I don't know if they can pull off the upset, but to keep it close and to cover the spread, I think is manageable just because you're probably looking at a lower scoring game just with how good the defense has been. So I get it. I agree with you. BYU hasn't looked great this season, but, maybe this is the game where they come out of their shell. We always talk about, with Kansas State, really unleashing the playbook. And so the first couple of games, we'll see how those can reflect how this BYU team can be moving forward. So to cover the spread, I think is fine. This line has actually moved in favor of BYU a couple points over the last couple days. So there is some respect from Vegas just with that defense, I think.
What does this say about the SEC if BYU goes in there and wins?
Yeah, good point.
BYU is, I'm sorry, it's considered one of the lesser teams in the Big 12 right now, and this spread just astonishes me. I trust Vegas understanding these teams more than a lot of the sports outlets that seem to just be so SEC heavy. Here's my favorite game of the week that doesn't involve K-State. Pitt and West Virginia, it slipped into a pick'em. I like pick'ems because you know what I get to do? Pick'em. I'm picking West Virginia. I think Pitt stinks. Plus, Pitt fans tell me they don't want to be in the Big 12, so they double stink. What are your thoughts on this one?
Don't disrespect my people at Pittsburgh like that. Come on.
They're not the Steelers. These are the Panthers.
Okay. Big difference, right? Yeah. They share the same stadium, but yeah. I'm actually going to disagree with you. West Virginia hasn't shown me much this year, whereas Pittsburgh has played a good game against Cincinnati last week. And so West Virginia obviously is coming off of a blowout win over Duquesne, but I think the story of that game was just how bad Duquesne was. West Virginia, after the loss in week 1, came out and had a punt that was a fumbled punt that, the ball ran into one of the West Virginia players, if that makes sense. I don't know how to describe that. And so they didn't come out focused, right?
Yeah.
And then the next possession was a punt. So West Virginia got down early in that game. I don't think they were very focused. Obviously, they ran away with it and were up by 4 touchdowns at halftime. But I lean Pittsburgh in this game. No bias there. But coming into the year, we've talked about Neil Brown and his status. I think his seat's going to continue to get warmer and warmer. That's not going to change on Saturday.
I would agree. I'm a little disturbed you talked about Neil Brown's seat, though. Here we go. The next game up, TCU This game's ugly. TCU is 7.5-point favorite at Houston. Houston just lost to Rice, which I don't understand at all. I don't want to watch this game. How far has TCU fallen? Are we about to find out?
Man, Houston's been the team that's, I guess, fallen's not the right word because they were never that high to begin with. But excuse me, that's the team that's really looked bad this year. You can throw out, if we wanted to throw out the week 2 game, you could look at week 1 and say, oh, they probably won a blowout in week 1. No, they barely beat UTSA. And so Houston's looked bad. I don't care if you want to bet TCU, that's fine. I would not touch Houston in this game. Just because TCU's shown some life, and maybe that Colorado loss, looking back at it as we've seen the Buffaloes play a few games now, that loss doesn't look so bad. And so Houston's been terrible. I can't place any money on them. If you're gonna go one way here, it's got to be TCU. I just don't get how you can bet Houston. If you want to go TCU, maybe go 7 instead of 7.5 and buy that half point. But don't touch Houston, in my opinion.
No, that's just good life advice. Don't touch Houston. Iowa State -3 at Ohio. Iowa State -3 at Ohio. Iowa State's only a 3-point favorite at a MAC school. I put this up for entertainment value. What is going on in Ames? Do they even cover this?
I don't know. I don't know why you picked this one, Fitz. I thought it was bad enough you picked TCU and Houston as a game we had to talk about, and now this one. But
I know
the under intrigues me here. Iowa State, the total has gone under 9 of its last 10 games. As for Ohio, the total has gone under 6 of its last 7 games. I get it that 42.5 is very low, but it's that low for a reason. And so, Fitz, I don't want to tell you who's going to win or lose this game. You would hope Iowa State just because it's against Ohio, but the under here, expect a very boring game with not a lot of points.
Okay. I've been trying to put in the K-State. It doesn't want to put the K-State little banner in.
Okay. That's it then. We're done?
No, we're not done. I just needed to show up. This is like the 4th time I've typed it. I typed it before we started. You know what, Gills? I sometimes think technology just messes with the elderly. Just torments us. Boom, I win.
There you go. Good job. Looks great.
I wasn't clicking the right things because technology and I'm old. K-State -4.5 at Mizzou. Now, right before we recorded this, and of course, this is all according to Caesars, which is the sports book of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports, both of our affiliates there. And this moved to 5 just this afternoon.
Okay, I didn't see that. Okay.
But we've been picking 4.5 on everything else. So let's go with the 4.5. I feel like this will be a much more competitive game than last year. Of course, I'll have my pick on the pregame before pregame with my 5 keys to victory. But I think this is going to be a close game. I still think K-State covers, but I do not agree with a lot of people that think this will be a blowout.
I'm glad you mentioned the line movement to 5 on Caesars because that was going to be my first point. Just all of the money right now. You can look at the numbers. They're there. It's flooding in on Kansas State. I saw one book that wasn't Caesars. It had, I think, 93% of all bets for the spread on Kansas State. So K-State, the public loves them, and Vegas isn't budging. Obviously, they're going to move it a half a point, but they're going to keep this line, relatively near 4.5 or 5, whatever it may be, because there is a belief. I'm probably sure that that's more of a metrics and a numbers thing than anything. But, why is that? I think the reason is Mizzou's talent, the star power on the Tigers team. I think where K-State gains an edge, though, in this game and why people are betting on Kansas State is the coaching, the state of the programs. Mizzou's coming off of a 6-6 season with a bowl loss, and then Kansas State, of course, coming off of a Big 12 championship. So I'm actually going to disagree with you, Fitz. I think K-State's going to win by a couple touchdowns, and that's not a homer pick or anything, right? I picked Kansas State to not cover in its first 2 games of the season. There's going to be a lot of purple in Columbia. I know you guys will be there and bring us all the coverage. I think K-State's ready for this one. I get it. The game that happened last year between these 2 teams is one you can just throw out because of the weather, the delays. And, Will Howard didn't play in that game. And so the quarterback position looks different for Kansas State. But just the way these 2 teams are playing, man, our behind enemy lines is going to go up on Thursday with Dan Keister. He did a good job of breaking down the Tigers and Wildcats, he's a Mizzou alum, and he's also a professor at Kansas State. So he follows both teams very closely, and I'll let you read all that when that's on the website. But he didn't seem too optimistic with Missouri. Now, I think Mizzou could win this game. I'm not going to write it off, but I think there's a lot more reasons to believe in Kansas State in this game than Mizzou. And of course, the public betting on K-State. Some people love to fade the public. I can't do that here. I think K-State wins this game comfortably. Now it's, we'll see. Offensive line for Missouri has been bad. The defense, that's the one thing I think Mizzou fans can hold their hats on, is the defense in this game that Mizzou does bring. They've been very respectable. On offense, though, if you can keep Brady Cook, from cooking, right? If you can keep him from doing damage on the ground, I think K-State's going to be okay in this game.
That's the wisest guy I know. He's the only person I know, apparently. Ryan Gilbert. Ryan, I'm a little concerned. You picked against K-State on the spread the last 2 weeks, that they wouldn't cover the spread. You thought they'd win. And now you're picking them to cover. Boy.
Yep. I hope I'm not the bad luck charm here this week.
I mean, usually my gambling motto to all those who follow along is fade Fitz. I'm going to fade Gills on that one.
Okay. Hashtag it.
I don't hashtag it. Maybe it'll catch on. I'll be an internet sensation. Ryan Gilbert, appreciate it very much. Go back to whatever you were doing, and I'm sure it was important. And that's it for this week's edition of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, with one exception. I need to tell you my one thing to keep an eye on throughout the course of this game. And I'm going to go back to the offensive line. I've got so many questions about these guys. They just seem out of sorts without Christian Duffy out there, which I find a little bit curious. But can they perform up to the needed standards to establish a run game at Missouri and protect Will Howard in the process so that he can have plenty of time to throw the ball? I expect Cooper Beebe to spend most of this game at right tackle, meaning Hadley Panzer moves to left guard, and Taylor Portier, who has still not recovered his normal level of play after 2 seasons missed with knee injuries, needs to start getting back to form. I don't know what they do if they need to move Cooper Beebe back inside, because honestly, Carver Willis has not been a great success. Maybe he'll just come in and relief a few possessions, but they are by far better off with Cooper at right tackle for now. When they get Duffy back, expected to be next week for sure, there is a possibility he could go on Saturday in Columbia. They will be back to their normal selves and probably very efficient in protecting Will Howard and running the ball. Remember, we've been sponsored by Robbins Motor Company. I've had such great experiences with Robbins, not only with the sales process, but the service needs of my Dodge Durango, that the GoPowercat official vehicle. Make sure you check them out. And I hope you're going to make it to Columbia. Kickoff 11 a.m. to Old Big 8 foes, tangling in a non-conference game one more time. As I said, this is a series I wish would continue, but this will probably be it for many years to come. So that's it for this episode of the Powercat Pregame Podcast. And remember, I guess I'll see you at Furrow Field if you are going to the game. If you're not going to the game and you're there, I've got questions for you.
Thank you for listening to the Powercat Podcast. Make sure you're subscribing to our show at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.